The life cycle of an Ork Waaagh is one of the most chaotic, violent, and bizarre processes in the universe. What begins as a simple gathering of brutish greenskins evolves into an unstoppable force that lays waste to planets and civilizations. Every Waaagh follows its own unique path, guided only by the crude instincts of the Orks and the strange power of Waaagh energy. But generally, it all begins and ends in a similar cycle. Let us explore how this brutal and relentless force grows, erupts, and ultimately burns itself out. The seeds of a Waaagh are planted long before the first battle cry is shouted. Orks are born from spores that flourish in any environment where violence and conflicts are ripe, or simply where enough other orks have been before. These spores give rise to a constantly regenerating cycle of orks, Gretchen and Squigs, creating an ecosystem in which orks are the dominant life form. A planet where even a few orks have landed will soon find itself infested with green-skinned brutes who spring up from the ground like mushrooms after a storm. As orks grow, they instinctively form into loose groups, each led by a boss. These groups spend most of their time engaging in fight, scrapping for resources, and engaging in constant brawls to determine dominance. Eventually, one ork, a nob or a warboss, manages to distinguish himself as the biggest, meanest, and loudest, and begins drawing other orks to him. This warboss's strength and cunning sparks a sense of unity among the normally factitious orks. This unification generates what is known as Waaagh energy, an innate psychic force that grows as more orks gather and believe in their leader's vision of unstoppable conquest. With a charismatic, by ork standards, warboss gathering a significant number of orks, the next phase of the Waaagh begins, gearing up for war. Orks love nothing more than a good scrap, and with enough orks all spoiling for a fight, they need weapons, vehicles, and armor to make it all the more fun. This is where the big mechs and pain boys shine. Big mechs are ork engineers with an unexplainable knack for machinery. While they do not understand technology in any conventional sense, they are able to cobble together devastating weapons, ramshackle vehicles, and crude armor from scrap metal, broken machinery, and anything else they can scavenge. Driven by a mixture of luck, intuition, and of course the Waaagh energy, big mechs construct everything from tanks and buggies to massive war machines known as stompers and gargants. Pain boys, on the other hand, attend to the orcs' physical needs by stapling extra limbs onto them, bolting metal plates to their skulls, and administering medical attention that often results in louder, angrier orcs ready for battle. Ork society views all of this preparation as a celebration of sort, with new machinery tested in fights and regular brawls breaking out over who gets the shiniest new shooter or the biggest chopper. The gathering of Waaagh energy grows as orks continue to rally, brimming with anticipation for a colossal war. Once the warboss is satisfied with the number of orks under his command and the level of preparation, he will declare the start of the Waaagh with a mighty roar. This moment is a catalyst, sending ripples of Waaagh energy throughout the assembled orks and unleashing an explosion of feather and violence. Orks rush to battle, eager to prove themselves and smash anything in their path. Ships are cobbled together, barely spaceworthy, and flung into the void towards the nearest target. The actual planning of where to go and what to attack is often random, Orcs might target planets purely because they happen to be the closest, or because they sound proper fighty, or simply because the warboss wants to make a show of strength. When the orcs descend upon a world, they come in droves, heedless of their own losses. Their ships, often assembled from scrap and filled with wildly unreliable weapons, careen through space and crash land with reckless abandon. Once an Ork Waaagh reaches a planet, the invasion escalates into full-scale war. Orcs storm the surface in vast numbers, crashing down in ramshackle drop pods and vehicles, with Gretchen and Squig swarming behind them. The warboss leads the charge, and his orcs are eager to prove their strength by crushing every enemy in sight. The sheer force of numbers, combined with their enthusiastic brutality, often overwhelms local defenses. Orcs thrive on the chaos of combat, each victory feeding into their Waaagh energy, which in turn fuels their morale and sometimes even warps reality itself. Guns that should jam keep firing, vehicles that should explode keep moving, and injuries that should kill only makes the Orc angrier. The Waaagh becomes a self-sustaining force, growing stronger with each clash, each mashed opponent, each new explosion. The Orcs push forward with unrelenting aggression, turning entire cities into battle zones, painting the landscape with greenskins, fire, and scrap metal. They are unorganized, but ferociously effective, with no concern for strategy beyond get close and smash. As the war grows, the Orcs' psychic energy heightens, their belief in victory somehow twisting reality itself to make them even more deadly. This phase is the height of the Waaagh, Orcs pouring out in an unstoppable tide. The Ork Waaagh can only sustain itself at peak frenzy for so long. As the battles stretch on, things inevitably start to plateau. Orcs are short-tempered and easily bored. If they don't encounter fresh challenges, their attention wanders. This boredom usually manifests in infighting. Different groups of orcs begin to clash over who is tougher, who gets the best loot, and who gets to stand closer to the warboss. Factions form within the Waaagh as orcs start to grow more interested in proving their might to each other rather than fighting the enemy. The warboss will often try to channel these rivalries back into combat with fresh targets, but if the fighting has grown stale, the orcs' attention begins to wane. The Waaagh loses momentum as the orcs turn on each other in an effort to stave off boredom. It is not uncommon for an entire Waaagh to collapse due to internal fighting, with orcs breaking off into smaller warbands and heading off in different directions to find new scraps. Eventually, the Waaagh energy that drove the orcs to unite and conquer begins to dissipate. Without constant fighting, the psychic connection weakens, and the once fervent orcs lose interest in the Grand Crusade. The warboss, having either been defeated in combat, or having lost control of his factitious followers, no longer has the unifying grip over the orcs. At this point, the Waaagh is essentially over. Orcs begin to scatter, either looking for new worlds to raid on their own, or returning to whatever habitats they originated from. Larger orc warbands may split into smaller mobs that wander the galaxy, drifting from fight to fight without a grand purpose. These fragmented groups will, in time, find new warbosses, restart the cycle, or end up as spores again, waiting to take root and breed more orcs for the next generation. Even when a Waaagh has disbanded, the legacy of orcs remain. The orcs leave behind spores on every world they touch, each one ready to sprout into a new generation. These spores grow into more orcs, Gretchen, and squigs, creating a fully self-sustaining ecosystem that ensures the orcs will never truly be eradicated from any world that they invade. In time, these new orcs will reach critical mass, forming new tribes, bosses, and, eventually, another warg. The orc life cycle is therefore eternal, a relentless loop of violence and regeneration. Even when defeated, the greenskin menace remains, festering in the shadows, just waiting to reach critical mass and erupt into another galaxy-spanning warg. There is no true end to the orc menace, as each battle, every conquest, and every lost war merely seeds new generations. To understand the Ork Waaagh is to understand that it is a process driven purely by momentum, belief, and unchecked aggression. Orcs have no greater goal, no final conquest in mind, only an endless hunger for conflict. Each warg is a burst of violence that will eventually fade. But the greenskin threat is immortal. The orcs thrive on war and spread like a contagion, so that even in defeat, they prepare the groundwork for the next crusade. It is a cycle as relentless and unyielding as the orcs themselves, a constant brutal testament to the galaxy's chaotic nature and the Imperium's eternal struggle against extinction.